What is post-traumatic stress disorder? According to the American Psychiatric Association, post-traumatic stress disorder, commonly referred to as PTSD, is an anxiety disorder in which fear and related symptoms continue to be experienced long after a traumatic event has occurred. These symptoms can include, but are not limited to, flashbacks or intrusive memories. People may live in a state of fear or always be on red alert. Commonly, people tend to avoid things that remind them of the traumatic event. Resulting consequences of PTSD on society are seen across a broad spectrum. People who exhibit symptoms of PTSD can have difficulties occurring in the workplace. These people can have difficulties maintaining relationships with family members and friends. Of course, healthcare is a concern for those who have PTSD, and subsequently doctors' offices, hospitals, and all healthcare providers are affected by this issue. In conclusion, who of us in society is truly affected by PTSD? That is each and every one of us, all parts of society.
In reality, anyone can get PTSD, anyone who has been through a traumatic event or witnessed a violent act. For example, survivors of natural disasters, rape, or sexual assault or abuse, military veterans, or anyone who has witnessed a catastrophic event, such as car accidents. There are other factors that contribute to PTSD like history of the trauma, life stressors, personality, coping skills, genetics, and brain structure. PTSD has a lifetime prevalence of 7 to 12%. From ages 18 to 29, there's 6.3% lifetime prevalence. From ages 30 to 44, there's an 8.2% lifetime prevalence. From ages 45 to 59, there is a 9.2% lifetime prevalence. And from ages 60 on, there's a 2.5% lifetime prevalence. Men report having experienced more traumatic events in their lives, but women have a higher prevalence of PTSD. Little has been written about the genetic and biological factors of PTSD because environmental events play central roles in the disorder. However, the autonomic and central nervous systems are both affected. Memory is a key component of PTSD. The hippocampus, amygdala, and hypothalamus pituitary gland are all main brain regions affected by the PTSD. The hippocampus plays an important role in learning and memory and decreases in mass. The amygdala is overreactive, and the HPA is one of the main systems affected after exposure to a trauma and are observed in PTSD.
The Department of Veteran Affairs operates the largest healthcare system in the United States, serving over 3 million enrolled veterans. Among its mandates is that family consultations, family education, or family psychoeducation. Family members often express high levels of interest in education and support, including a desire for education about the illness, coping tools, help with family relationships, and reassurance that they are not alone. Veterans also desire their support from their families. Found that 86% of veterans living with PTSD describe their PTSD as a source of family stress, and almost 80% wanted greater family involvement in their care.
Post-traumatic stress disorder can affect anyone. There is not a certain personality that is more likely to be affected by PTSD. However, anyone that has had traumatic exposure for an extended amount of time, has a family history of psychological disorders, is an immigrant, a veteran, or has been exposed to natural disasters, is a survivor of sexual assault, or has been exposed to physical trauma is much more susceptible to the disorder. Research states that when comparing Caucasians and Hispanics in a similar traumatic event, people of Hispanic descent are more sensitive to PTSD. The differences that were offered to clarify these findings are coping mechanisms among Hispanics and Caucasians and differences in exposure to traumatic events. These factors also contribute to the degree of PTSD.
PTSD is the most commonly studied outcome in the aftermath of natural disasters. Family factors that might moderate the relationship between trauma exposure and PTSD may be the level of conflict within the family. A natural disaster victim whose atmosphere consists of arguments and conflicts is an indication of lack of family support. The conflicts and arguments within the family who's experienced natural disaster is because of excessive burdens and responsibility in many areas of today's life.
Conflict theory. According to conflict theory, inequality exists because those in control of a disproportionate share of society's resources actively defend their advantages. The masses are not bound to society by their shared values, but by coercion at the hands of those in power. The perspective emphasizes social control, not consensus and conformity. Groups and individuals advance their own interests, struggling over control of societal resources. Those with the most resources exercise power over those with inequality, and power struggles resulting. There is great attention paid to class, race, and gender in this perspective because they are seen as the grounds of the most pertinent and enduring struggles in society. Conflict theory has a direct correlation in those who are affected by PTSD. According to the conflict theory, those practicing certain behaviors are labeled by those in power. Once labeled, it's extremely difficult to avoid internalizing that label and escaping it. So when we look at a person who has PTSD from actions such as killing someone in a war, being a victim of a natural disaster, or a woman who's been forced into sex trafficking, all of these people have a potential to blame themselves for their own circumstances. They may feel they made choices that put themselves in the very situation that caused the PTSD. Society only encourages this feeling through conflict theory, as those in power are the ones who are making the laws, making the healthcare decisions, and providing legal assistance, or not, for these individuals.
The likelihood of developing PTSD is related to pre-trauma susceptibility, the biopsychosocial, magnitude of the stressful event, preparedness for the event, and the quality of care after the event.
Ethical considerations of PTSD. When focusing on ethical considerations for persons with PTSD, trauma research presented as an ethical concern. Considering the statement, "First, do no harm," a real concern about trauma-focused research would be exposing the participant to even more trauma by having them place strong focus on the incident that brought on the PTSD. Is it indeed ethical to conduct research if we are not sure that participation in this research might bring on even worse symptoms of PTSD? According to empirical research, reactions are mixed. Some studies say people with PTSD are affected in a negative way by this research. It brings on more trauma by having to talk about their experience. However, other studies say that there are a number of people who find being a participant in the research rather therapeutic. A researcher should look individually at a person with PTSD to help make the decision if this research will help or harm the person when the research is complete. Another ethical issue concerning research in PTSD are the issues involved in using pharmacotherapy to prevent PTSD. Using pharmacotherapy can involve giving medication to a person not in conjunction with therapy. For instance, the person has experienced a trauma. They are immediately given medication to prevent PTSD. This is actually being used in the military with soldiers who do not have access to therapy right away. One of the ethical considerations here is informed consent. Can a person who has just recently experienced a trauma actually give informed consent when being given medication? In a military environment, soldiers can actually be ordered to take this medication. There are many ethical concerns that come into play when one is forcing another person to take medication. A social worker following the NASW Code of Ethics can and should always be an advocate for what is best for the client. Social workers can be a voice for their clients who could potentially be harmed by unethical research or the use of medication that may produce more harm than the client than good. In conclusion of our presentation, we would like to provide you with our call to action. Our call to action includes helping persons who are affected with PTSD on a micro, meso, and macro level. On a micro level, we would like to have a 24-hour hotline where persons who are affected with PTSD can reach out to someone for help. The people answering the hotline should be able to do telephone counseling as well as having information as to where to refer people to who need more assistance. On a meso level, we'd like to have a community center open to people who are affected by PTSD. center will be staffed by a licensed social worker as well as community volunteers. This will be a place where people can come for counseling as well as a place to meet others who are having some of the same issues. Individual counseling as well as group therapy will be provided. We would also like to hold workshops for people in the community who would like to learn more about the issues of PTSD. CEUs can be earned by attending these workshops. On a macro level, we would like to see current legislation changes for people who have been affected by PTSD. We would like to see PTSD be considered by courts as a viable reason for actions of people when they are charged with a crime. We would like for courts to consider PTSD a mental illness and sentence defendants by providing them with more access to mental health care instead of jail time. Thank you.